Right, so hello and welcome. I've actually just changed the name of this podcast to Body Confidence Radio, and previously it was Wai-shee Radio, so just had to quickly remind myself not to introduce it as that because it's very new. So you're actually the first episode on the Body Confidence Radio.
Yay!
Woo! So, welcome, Natalie. I'm excited to ask you about your story and share with the listeners about self esteem. So, you came into my digital world when you were doing body confidence, and I know a lot of self esteem relates to body confidence anyway. So, we have a lot to talk about and a lot that we relate on those topics. But it's interesting that you called yourself a body confidence coach and now you're into self esteem, which obviously self esteem is one of the underlying issues that happens that causes us to have body confidence, body image, and food issues anyway. So I will be asking you about that too. But if you'd like to just start by introducing yourself.
Yes, I will try and do a good job of this. It changes every time I do it. So I am Natalie. So yes, I'm a self-esteem coach these days. And basically I work with women, and do you know what? My big aim is just to help us to stop with the self-doubt, with the negative self-talk, and just really get comfortable in ourselves, because there's so many of us who doubt ourselves, who don't think we're good enough. So my aim is to help women to see how amazing they are and start trying to shift our focus from the external stuff to actually just who we actually are as a person.
Mm. So I want to know who you are as a person. And if you wouldn't mind going back to the beginning and just telling us a little bit about your story, what your experience was of self esteem and body image, how you began to do that work, and what led you to what you do now.
Yes. Who am I? It's a good question. I think I'm ever changing. But
As we all are.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But what got me into it, do you know, I don't think I realized the mess I was in, so to speak, until I was probably about 20, because it's classed as normal. And I always say to people, I don't know what came first. I don't know whether it was a self-esteem thing, which I deflected and tried to control my appearance to try and get that power and control that a lot of it's all about. Or if I was really insecure about my body and that projected into everything else, because I just found myself feeling really insecure in everything. And when I kind of bring it all back, there's little moments, I think we all have them, where we think, oh God, I remember that moment and I felt really insecure. So my parents split up when I was 6, and me and my sister, we moved around a lot. So we were with my dad, we were with my mum. We were loved, absolutely loved by everybody, but it wasn't very stable. We would move quite a bit. So I think we both developed the need for acceptance from other people. We wanted to know we were safe, know we were loved, and we would get that through praise and attention. We then moved in with my grandma when I was probably about 9. And basically we had to meet new people. So I was quite shy, although I still like to think I'm really funny. So I was like, well, I think I'm funny. This is good. I've generally been okay at making friends. But I found that I started to change myself a little bit to try and like fit in with other people. And what would happen is me and my sister are quite different to look at physically. So we are both beautiful. But my sister is really tall. She's always been in more of a larger body because she is tall anyway. So we've always looked quite different. And she's always been the person who did really well at school, whereas my grades were okay. I could get by, but I was more interested in playing netball or getting on the rounders team because that was what lit me up. And I think we ended up falling into these boxes where she was the intelligent one and I was the one who was the fitter one, the one who could do the sports and didn't struggle to get boyfriends type scenario. And my dad, bless his soul, meant no intention, but would make jokes about how, Rachel should lose weight, my sister, and I should just focus on not trying to like succeed in like career life, and more just like when get yourself a nice husband and focus on looking pretty. So we ended up both coming to a place where we were really insecure about not only just our intelligence but also how we looked. And I was coming from a place where I would get a lot of compliments because I was in quite a small body, with the washboard stomach, really good at sport. So a lot of my praise came about how I looked. So as I got older, I really, really attached my worth to that. So, I wanted everybody to think I was attractive. I wanted everybody to think I was beautiful. I needed people to give me compliments about how I looked, whether it was what I was wearing, how pretty my face was. I needed the compliments to feel good. And if I didn't get them, I felt rubbish. And it got to, I moved in by myself. Been in a couple of relationships. My relationships would never pan out that well because eventually my insecurities and my constant need for compliments was pretty draining, to say the least, I'm sure. So I found myself living alone, and therefore I was just free to do whatever I fancied. And that fell into weighing everything, counting everything. I had every app you could find. Fitness Pal was, I thought, my friend, and I would weigh everything onto it. I would go to the gym, and if I wasn't doing heavy exercise that burnt the maximum calories, what was the point? So if people suggested yoga to me, I'd be like, not a chance. So I became obsessed, and I mean obsessed. And by this point, I'm 5'2". I'm not the tallest person, and I probably weighed 8 stone. By anyone else looking in, they would be like, what's, you're crazy, like, what are you doing? And a bit of me thought that was true, but what I came to realize was I just started to really, really struggle with body dysmorphia. So what I saw was very different to what, say, somebody else would see, or what other people would think looking in. And it just became obsessive. And I mean obsessive. It gets to a point, doesn't it, where we're checking a menu before we got out to eat, so I could pick what I was eating, so that I could make sure I burnt enough calories so that I could eat that thing. And it just controlled everything. And as a result, I wasn't very confident. I stayed in really rubbish jobs because I didn't want to be looked at. I thought I was stupid because that's not where my qualities lied, as far as my brain told me. So I made myself really small, and I got angry. I got frustrated. My normal humor turned into nasty, really snide sarcasm. Like, I became like really nasty as a person, even though I knew I wasn't, because I was just so frustrated by the endless game of, what do I look like? What do people think? Oh, I think I'm like, oh, I'm good enough now. Oh, now I'm not. I'm going on holiday. I need to get 5 pounds lighter than I want to be so that I can relax on holiday and have a good time and come back and not have to worry about it. Like, I fell into this place. So what I found was I hit probably about late 20s, and it was all just coming to a head. I was really depressed, really anxious. And I ended up being single. And I told myself, do you know what? Be single for a while. Like, just stop. Whatever you're doing, stop. And I'd studied uni. I'd decided at 25 that I was intelligent enough to go to uni. So I did it in the evenings around work. So I did psychology and health, which I found so interesting, and came away with the first, which even at the end of that, I was like, yeah, but it's, it's quite an easy subject, isn't it? It's not difficult, like, really, still. Oh, I only got a first because it's not because I'm intelligent, it's because it's an easy topic. And I went on and did that, and I started working around the area, so doing interventions with people, working on the stuff from that side, on our thinking and stuff. And it really helped me to realize that it's not me. It wasn't me in the fact that I'm somehow messed up and there's something wrong with me and it'll forever be this way. I realized that I was just really stuck in a pattern and a rut. So I started to work on that, which was pretty painful. I went around in a lot of cycles where I would think,
Was it you helping clients that then made you start helping yourself?
yeah, so I was helping them around alcohol. So I went to start doing it around alcohol and substances.
Everything relates though, doesn't it?
Yeah. So as I'm talking, I'm thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I do. I just do it around food and exercise.
Isn't that interesting? Because Overeaters Anonymous actually comes from the wife of a guy who is in AA.
Does
and
it?
she saw it and said, every behavior that he has, I have around food. Therefore, I must be addicted to food.
Yeah. And it's mad, isn't it? And it's all, and as I was talking to, like, because I said work with men and women there, and most of the time, not all the time, obviously, it always came down to this just really low opinion of themselves. Just like, I can't manage my emotions. I'm not worth anything. Nobody likes me. I can't change. And I realized that that's kind of what I was doing. So I started to think about, okay, how can I change this in myself? Because it's one thing to think it and know it. It's another thing to change it. So I probably spent about a good year, for maybe about 25, 26, thinking, I really need to sort this out. Like this isn't good or healthy for me. But at the same time, having no
How did
idea,
you know that it wasn't good or healthy for you?
because I could see, I felt like there was two of me. So there was the one of me who felt like it had rational sense, who was saying, Natalie, what are you doing? You are a great person. This really doesn't matter. Like, you can do so many amazing things. And then there was this other one who was like, do you know what? No, count your crackers, go get drunk Friday night, cry in the corner, like it's all messed up. Like, and it's not your fault. It's life, it's all these things that have happened, it's the world. And I would sit there toying between these two for quite a while. So I would think I need to change something, but then I would slip into the denial of my own responsibility of it, because that felt easier. So it'd be like, well, if that hadn't happened, I'd probably feel better, if they hadn't said that. And I would blame a lot. And I found that blaming was really bad for me, which is why when you see me talk now, I don't really bother talking about diet culture much, because I kind of don't want to give it too much air. I want people to be aware of it, but then I think we need to go, right, here it is, and we need to understand it and how it works. But we have to then come back to us, because the only person who can change it is ourselves. So I started small, started very small. I would, first of all, just catch myself and the things that I said to myself. And just, first of all, at first I just would say, just don't think that. And I'd just distract myself. And that's about the best I could do for a little bit. And that worked a bit. And then I would allow myself to not get on the scales 7 times a day. I would just get on once. So it was really slow and steady. It probably took me about, probably from the age of 26 to probably 31 to really feel like, actually, do you know what? Maybe I'm making some good changes here. Maybe this is actually working for me, because for me, I didn't really understand at the time. And I think in the UK, we're a bit more behind as far as coaching or certain things that were online. So I was a bit like, I don't know where to go to talk to anyone about how I felt, because I honestly felt really stupid, because I knew that from society's point of view, I looked perfectly fine. I was ticking all the boxes. I'm white British, I'm thin, I'm ticking all these boxes. And a lot of people around me who, to be fair, also had body image issues going on, who were doing the yo-yo dieting, were in bodies who were getting more shamed. So I'm thinking, I can't talk to some of my friends and family about this, because they're going to be thinking, you what? Are you actually joking? And that is sometimes the response I would get. It'd be treated like, oh God, she's just, she's attention seeking again. Look at her looking for pity. Oh God, boo-hoo, Natalie, your size 8 body. Oh God, it's all horrendous. So I just stopped doing it. So then it became really internal, and that's the worst place it can be, isn't it? The worst place. So I was just trying to do it. So honestly, I just started small, like I say, just not weighing myself in the morning, at dinner time, at tea time, just before I went to bed. Even just stopping doing that took effort. It was like, and I couldn't just not get on them. I was struggling too much with that. So I'd just get on once, and I'd just get on in the morning, when I thought I'd be the lightest. And then I had to stop weighing myself altogether. And then I had to stop weighing food. And then I tried to delete the apps, and then I'd put them back on again, because I'd think, oh, I just need to know.
You were obviously in cognitive dissonance. So you had those two
Yeah.
and you were in conflict the whole time. When did you realize then that you needed to heal those parts or look at where it came from?
Do you know, I think, and I don't like to tell him too much, because I don't like him to get a big head, but my current partner, we've been together nearly 12 years. So we got together when I was about 28, 29. And he's really very black and white. It's, you got a problem, sort it. So when we got together, I was still very much trying to sort it out. And a lot of the things that I would try and get my normal validation for, I was just getting rejected by him about, in the nicest possible way. So it really put a mirror in front of me of what behavior I was doing. And at that point I thought, I'm gonna have to change. So he would say things like, I'd come downstairs and I'd be like, do I look okay? Do I look fat? Like, no, just look at me properly. Like, let me turn around. Does my bum look big? Have I got a muffin top at the back? Like, how does this look? Should I take the tights off? And he's like, whatever you're doing, you're not going to get it from me. I've just said you look fine. If you're not comfortable, go and get changed. If you're comfortable, can we just go out and have a good night? And I'm like, oh, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about me. He's not giving me any compliments. And I found it really challenging, like really challenging. And that really helped me to...
That was great, because he obviously didn't play into what other men did previously.
No, he was not. He's not up for it. And I remember him once saying to me, I was plattling on like I would do in the normal conversation about my weight and how I look, the general run-of-the-mill Friday night combo. And I remember he said, do you know what, Natalie, can I tell you what the most unattractive thing about you is? And you know, you think, I want you to, but I really also don't want you to. And he said, it's this constant need. He said, you could lose weight, you can put on weight. I honestly really don't care about what shape your body is. The only thing that's going to ruin this relationship is this constant need and this insecurity, and you really need to sort it out. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, all right, okay, I hear you. And I think it pushed me, because until that point it was just me telling myself it, and I thought the rest of the world didn't see it. I thought it was just in my head. But he was basically just putting a big mirror in front of me and saying,
but at the same time, your clients were in front of you mirroring the same behaviors, just with a different...
Yes, exactly.
How did you feel at that point when you were coaching them?
Do you know, I think to a certain degree, when I was doing it in the substance use, because it was a different topic, I could talk about it like I had loads of knowledge about it, but it wasn't about alcohol and drugs. So I actually felt really well informed around it. But I think because it's a different subject, what I was doing at the time was kind of using that as a deflection from my own stuff. You know, I think sometimes we can get into coaching, and I don't do it now in the self-esteem coaching, but definitely when I did it in alcohol, we can get into helping people thinking that it will help us to help ourselves, and it doesn't. It's either a distraction
Or ignore yourself, yeah,
or it just reinforces
yeah.
the issues. Absolutely. And what I found was I'd done the alcohol for probably about, it was a long time. I must have been doing it for about 7-8 years. And then I decided that, well, I decided I was going to get pregnant. We're going to have babies. So me and Steve decided we were going to have kids. And at that point was another push of me, whereas I'd done a lot of work and I was a lot better. But so this time I was about 31. And I was like, right, I'm going to have a baby. Like, I've got to be really, really mindful of what I'm up to here, because I found that when I got pregnant, it triggered me. So it really triggered me. So we think we've resolved our stuff and we're like, yes, I am on fire, no more issues, all my body image is sorted. And then I got pregnant and my body started to change. And at this point, it had gone up and down a bit, but it had kind of stayed the same, even though I'd stopped weighing and measuring. And I started to change and I started to put on weight, and I was full on triggered. So you get given like a little graph, don't you, about, this is how people normally gain weight during pregnancy. This is the normal. And then they plot you along it. I was so obsessed with it. It like literally just flagged up everything. I didn't start like weighing food or anything, but I became obsessed with my weight again. And if I was, and now when I like look at it, I think, oh, how messed up.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I mean, going back right from the very beginning, I'm nodding away this whole time, because literally even from your childhood, like how you were with your sister, I relate to so many parts of your story. But this part in particular, where you're talking about being pregnant, mine was like the opposite. So it was a trigger for me in terms of, it was a highlighting moment that I then knew I needed to change my life, because I wasn't able to have a baby. I'd already had a child years before, but now I was in the height of my eating disorder without having any periods. I was infertile. So I was then given IVF. We started down the line of that. But it's so interesting that when I actually was pregnant, I then, because I loved my baby so much, I let go of it all, let go of all the control. And I was like, I need to eat because I need to nourish her. I need to do less exercise or listen to my body. And I was so like, natural and just intuitive. But then as soon as she was out, I was like punishing myself again. You've got to get your body back and all of that stuff, which obviously shows you, like, you can see that in that sentence. I loved my baby. I didn't love me. So that's what happened with me. So it's interesting. Yours is the other way around.
Yeah. And I think, and it is, and I think pregnancy can kind of take us either way, can it? So during the pregnancy, I was weighing myself all the time, and I was going to eat. Like, I've always been an eater. Even when I was restricted, I still enjoyed eating. So this is where I would generally like binge restrict because I like to eat food. So I would find that I was allowing myself to eat certain foods. I might still have been thinking I was allowing myself, but not really. But I was weighing myself again. And obviously I was being weighed. So I was finding that if I was getting over that plot line, if I was above it, I was like filled with like shame and, oh my God, I'm putting on too much. Like I didn't want to gain more than a stone and a half. And now it looks like I'm going to gain 2. And obviously it started to like really bother me, not to the point where I would like restrict or do anything, but it really bothered me. And I was like, how am I going to cope with this? And then I had the baby. So I was like doing exercise during the pregnancy, obviously suitable exercise. So I would find like first trimester, second trimester, but I was like doing it every day. And I found that I had the baby, great, nice, easy birth, all well and good. And I found I flipped at that point, because then, when you just had the baby, and I thought, I'll do all this exercise and then I'll have the baby. And because I've, done all this stuff, I'll just have a flat stomach. The second baby's out, of course, which I did not, obviously. To this day, you do a plank, it's gonna hang down a little bit. So I struggled with that at first, but then, do you know what? I was so distracted by taking care of Robin that I wasn't as self-involved. So I wasn't paying as much attention to myself, but that was actually a good thing. So after I'd had her, that for me was the shift, where I was like, actually, do you know what? How amazing. And then I went on to you. I was like, oh my God, how amazing am I? My body has made this baby. This is great. Like, it doesn't really matter if it's changed a little bit. Like, look how beautiful this baby is. And then I had something more important than myself to think about in that sense. Because obviously I am obviously the most important thing to me. But I was self-obsessed and self-focused. And that was a lot of my issue. So when I had Robin, I wasn't as self-focused and I wasn't as self-obsessed. And it really helped me to tune into the other things and kind of just get out of my head long enough to think a bit clearer, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that, as we go through stuff, we'll all have flare-ups, don't we? So I think we all have flare-ups where we don't like how we look. We all have flare-ups about a thought will pop into our head, like, thoughts pop into my head like, oh, I wonder what I weigh, or I wonder how many calories in that. Like, things will pop in and I just have to push them to the side. But yeah, I think when I then became
that one anymore. I don't.
Yeah.
What do I weigh? But and I call it my spiritual immune system. It's like if my immune system is down, and it may be I've not been looking after myself, I may have been rushing around doing too much work, or I may be hormonal or tired, or all of those things, then I might just automatically count calories in my head, because I don't need it now, because I got so good at it. I knew how many calories were in everything, and then I'll find myself doing it and I'm like, what? Why am I doing that? Like, I don't need to know how many calories there are. But those things for me are now like a red flag. So I know if it comes up, it's because I haven't paid attention to some other area in my life. Like, maybe I have been frantic and I haven't even slowed down to breathe, and that little moment is like, oh yeah, take some time to breathe now and look at what actually is going on underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it, isn't it? I think now, instead of when we have thoughts like that, thinking, oh God, I've had a thought about that, which means I'm completely back to square one, it's all rubbish. It's just about, okay, why has that popped up? Right, well, it's because my clothes are a bit tighter. Because
and it's still a thought. It doesn't mean that you have to act on it. That's the
thing, isn't it? And that's the thing. And I think one of the biggest things for me, because I have girls as well, I mean, I don't know if I'd feel differently if it was boys or not. I can't say. I've only got 2 girls. But do you know what? The idea that either of my girls would end up with a relationship with themselves or their body like I had, honestly, just it makes me want to cry just thinking about it. Just to think that they would be that obsessed with it or allow it to impact their life in the same way or even worse ways than mine did, just fills me with horror. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, I'm not bringing any of my stuff into this. So I'm going to have to challenge it. I'm going to have to keep working on it. And, you
Which is
know,
interesting because a lot of people do work with children. I don't know if you do with the self-esteem stuff, but even I was writing my first book and it was for children. I go into schools and talk to children. So I thought, oh, that's the good market to put this work towards. But actually, as time's moved on, I've changed my book again to now be for adults because I'm realizing even my issues that I had as a child, a lot of it came from my mum. Not that it was her fault, but I was just looking at her thinking, this is how you need to be a woman. And she was doing all this exercise to change her body and she was eating in certain ways to change her body. So I thought, that's what I need to do. And so I realised it's all the mums really that are reflecting onto the daughters, whether dads and sons is working the same or not, I don't know. But I certainly use my mum as an influence. And so if she'd have changed her habits, it would have changed mine. And the way that I've spoken about body image and food, and obviously with this being my work, both of my daughters have heard this a lot. And so far, touch wood, they've been absolutely fine with body image.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, I
And like
think,
complete intuitive eaters just naturally. And it's really nice to watch.
yeah. And I think it you know, we have that responsibility. And that's why, like you said, like for exactly that reason, I feel like I can't change the world in one go. Like I always saying to people, like, you know, we can't, there's no point me standing here and attacking diet culture and you know, you're probably not going to see me dancing around showing you my rolls or doing anything like that because it's just not who I am and how I am. I said, but do you know what?
But that's one way to do body positivity, isn't it? Which is a whole nother thing
Yeah,
to talk about.
it is. And I'm all up for that. And I think go for it.
Yeah. But
Me,
it's not the way.
yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't have
Me,
to
I
be your
prefer
way.
to just say, just stop looking at bodies so much. Like stop giving them so much
Yeah.
attention. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to look at bodies all the time. I don't look at
Yeah.
mine all the time. I don't look at anybody else all the
Yeah.
time.
I want to talk to a human being.
Yeah, I'm happy to look at everyone and think,
Yeah.
oh, so beautiful, but I don't need to see. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay attention to bodies. So for me, a little bit of me is like, well, if we're flaunting bodies to promote it, then for me, it's still bringing the attention of bodies. The look of your body is important, and I
Yeah.
want to move away from the fact that it's
It
not
totally
important at
is.
all.
Which is interesting as
So,
well when you speak to some people who don't have any issues with their body, but it's because they fit the beauty standards right now. And then, like you said about getting all that validation, you then will need it. And what happens if the beauty standards changes, or your body changes, or you have a baby, or you grow old, and all of these things will change how your body is.
yeah, and all that,
So
you
we
know,
need
and
to learn to love ourselves from the inside.
absolutely, and it's that acceptance piece, isn't it? You know, because I
Bring
can sit
us
here
back
and say,
to self-esteem then. So I want
yeah,
to find out, like, when you got to this point in your journey, how did you then decide to be a body confidence coach and then start working on self-esteem as well?
yeah. So when it basically happened at the beginning of COVID. So I'd then moved. So I'd worked in substance use. I was working in prisons doing things. And obviously I couldn't go into prisons. I couldn't do some of the stuff that I was doing. So I was just in prison at this time. And I was like, right, okay. So they were like, just train yourself up on stuff at home. And I was like, okay, all right then. So I thought I would do a life coaching course, and this looks interesting. It looks like right up my street. I like talking to people. I'm beyond obsessed with how the mind works. So I was like, I'll do this. And as I was learning, I was thinking, this is I kind of know all this stuff. It's like what I did in psychology. It's what I did in my masters and stuff. Like I know this, but it was interesting to see it from the angle of working with people. So I decided that, do you know what? I want to do something. You know, the kids are young, so I was trying to work around their school hours. And I was like, do you know what? I want to do something that really, really matters to me. And, you know, my issues with body image are things that I hadn't at that point massively talked about with people, like been really, truly honest about. So when I was thinking about, well, I'll do coaching. Why not do life coaching? And, you know, you work with people, you have conversations with the coaches and they're like, well, you know, what would you want to do it about? Like, what's really important to you? And I was like, well, what's really important to me is people not being obsessed with how they look and it not being the be all and end all of their sense of worth in themselves. And I think initially I wanted to work with people like myself who'd been in the normal beauty standard size body, but was still struggling. But then I didn't want to kind of box myself off that much. So when I kicked off talking about it, I did get a little bit of, even my sister said to me, bless her, she's like, I'm not saying this because I think it, but do you not think that some people might not take you seriously talking about body image because you're in a small body? I was like, it has crossed my mind, Rachel. Like, it has crossed my mind that I might get a lot of like, what does she know? What is her problem? Oh yeah, it must be so hard for you, but what about me? But then I thought, but that's more reason to do it, because body image, it's in our heads, so it's not, there are complete recognition that some of us struggle more. If we don't fit into the box, we are more likely to get external issues which make it worse. Absolutely 100%. But I don't.
So thin privilege, which is something that I do talk about when I do my talks, because I've had people say to me, oh, well, it's all right for you to say all this stuff because you look perfect. And I've showed them pictures of me doing bodybuilding, which is what I thought was the picture of perfection, and how even when I achieved that, I didn't love myself on the inside. So it didn't matter what the exterior was. If I was bigger or smaller, I still felt the same on the inside. Didn't make a difference. So I do acknowledge the thin privilege side of it, the fact that I even get to do a talk. Because if someone was obese, maybe they would think, oh, you're unhealthy. Because of all the shame and stigma around size and weight, maybe they wouldn't even be able to stand there and have a talk like that. So I teach people all the things that I learned, and a lot of it came from the fat acceptance movement, from health at every size, from body positivity. So I have to acknowledge where I stand in all of that. But like you said, we do have a place to have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially from my side, coming from the fitness industry, and a lot of people are instructors and having issues with it all.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I'll always say to people, if we are still in a place where we're judging anybody, then we've still got some stuff to work on, because I know that I have had people who work in the body positive space who might have been in larger bodies, who have been like, oh yeah, it's always nice when thin people talk about body acceptance. And I'm like, okay, it seems like you've got some stuff to work on still, because if you're judging me based on how I look, then there's still some stuff to work on that level. And I really want us to like not do that to each other. It doesn't really matter what size body we are in. It doesn't matter what shape, bump, size, how many stretch marks we've got, big nose, little nose, it doesn't matter. Like, I want us all just to start treating each other with the same equal respect. And in that space, give everyone a voice. And I know some people, we do in some situations, I think, need lifting up higher, so our voice is more heard from certain circles, 100%. But I don't want that to be at the cost of the other people. I don't want other people to rise up at the cost of other people. Does that make sense? I don't want it to be a divide, really. Is kind of how I see it.
Mm-hmm. So looking at the work that you do now on self-esteem and all of the people that you worked with on other topics like the alcohol and drugs, how does that all come together? Like, do you think it all tends to come from a place of low self-esteem from childhood that causes these issues later on in life?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just skills that we don't learn. So the skills of managing our emotions, the skills of being able to set boundaries and be assertive, I think that mixed in with the environments that we might grow up in, and maybe the messages, the beliefs that are passed on down to us about either what's important on a societal level or who we are as a person. If we're brought up constantly being told, we look horrific, we should lose weight, you're stupid, you're never going to count to anything, we're going to grow up with those ideas in mind, and that's obviously going to impact how we then show up.
Yeah. And well, you mentioned your sister as well, and I was nodding away. I was thinking I actually had comparison with my sister as well. So they said she was like more clever, like you said about your sister. She was everything that I wasn't. And so it was almost like be as good as her, which then started off my comparison and jealousy. So even though I didn't start with body image, it was just be like your sister in any way you can, dress like her, like the same music, then you'll have as many friends as her because she's better than you. it's so interesting how I had such a big issue with jealousy in my relationships and leading up to the now where I worked on it. And my daughter, who's 11, I remember her friends were playing outside and they came to knock for her and she didn't want to go out, and then they just carried on playing without her. And I said to her, does that make you jealous? And she was like, jealousy, mummy? That's not an emotion I've ever felt. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, I've obviously done something right. But also because her and her sister have got a big age gap and they don't live together, they've never been together for me to say, oh, she's right and you're wrong, or you need to be like her, or like with my mum did with me and my sister, even dress us as twins. You know, people shouldn't do that if you're listening. Let your children have their individual personalities. But still, it's interesting that a child could grow up and not even feel jealous, and how I had such a big issue with it.
It is, and it's, and I think it is like you say, like it's just what we're told, isn't it? You know, and I'm really, really mad because my kids are 6 and 8, so I do catch myself and make sure I don't say the things like, honestly, can you just behave yourself like Robin is, or can you just like, I try, and I'm like, just before it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't make a comparison, because we're not comparable. You know, none of us are comparable to anybody else. Like, we're never going to have exactly the same IQ. We're never going to have exactly the same bodies. Like, we could all sit here and we could study, you know, we could study exactly the same courses. We could eat exactly the same food. We could move the same way, sleep the same amount of sleep, and we'd all be completely different. And we've just got to realize that that's actually a really beautiful thing. So let's start to focus on what we do like about ourselves, what qualities we bring to the table, and then focus ourselves around them rather than the things that we think we lack in any way.
Which is difficult as a parent with children who go to school, because obviously school is a system, isn't it? And tries to put everybody into a box. So there is a right and a wrong, and there is one way that you should be and should behave. And it doesn't like people who don't conform to it.
Yeah.
And obviously as individuals, like when you grow up and leave school and you become an entrepreneur or whatever, you get to choose whatever you do, and you can be creative and you can do whatever you like.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's a small thing. Like, a lot of my like my niece has done really well at school. Like, she's getting like, she's doing like a 6th form now, like literally knocking out A's and A stars every time she does anything. And Steve's family, they're all very much the same. So there's probably like 5 or 6 of them. They vary a little bit, but all the ones who've got to the point where they're leaving school have all come out with really good marks. You know, they all went to the grammar school, they all did this, they all did that. And I'm always saying to Steve, like, I don't want this to be a pecking order thing. I don't care if either of my kids go to grammar school. I don't really care if they want to go to uni, they can go to uni. I'll encourage them in any way, but I don't want this to be a thing. And I've always like said, I don't want to, unless my child wants to have, like, say, extra tuition to pass if they want to do it, fine, let's do it. But I'm not going to be the person who says, no, you need to spend 4 hours of your week in your youth, in your childhood, not playing with your friends, but sitting here making sure you pass that test, because that's really important. I'm like, I'm not really into that. I don't care if they go to grammar school. I don't care if they go to the school that I went to, which they thought, well, they can't go there, it's a rubbish school. I'm like, do you know what? You could send a child to any school you want, and there's no guarantees how that child's going to come out, because it's who they decide to hang around with. It's the messages they get from their parents. So it doesn't really matter. And I'd much rather that my kids were just happy and doing whatever they fancied doing. And yes,
right now, a lot of the kids have social media, and we've got this issue with filters making us look a certain way and comparing ourselves to other people's lives.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just, you know, you can flick down social media.
Self-esteem to your children.
I think, do you know what? I'm trying to think how I actively do it. I think I just try, I think I like to make sure they're heard. Like, I do try, and I mean, I can be like every mum, so I can be a little bit crabby at times and a little bit impatient, but I try and make sure that they know that they can set boundaries. So I will say to them, you really need to give me 5 minutes. When I say I'm going upstairs 5 minutes, I need you to not follow me. I want to be, and you are entitled to do the same. So I will find that Robin, who's 8, she'll be like, Mom, I've told Alana that I need 5 minutes, and she keeps following me. And I'll be like, Alana, you need to come downstairs now, because if Robin needs 5 minutes, you need to leave her alone. She's entitled to it. So I really encourage them to set their boundaries and know that they can do. They don't have to explain it. I like to encourage them to talk about how they feel. I will say things to them that, if they've done something, and maybe I'll tell them off for something. I'll be like, don't think in any moment when I'm saying that I like you or love you any less. Like, it's not about you as a person. We're talking just about that incident of behavior. So don't attach the two. Don't think that if I say something about something you've done, and if you have a fallout with your sister and you're fighting, and you get told off, like, don't take it personally.
It's like how Brené Brown describes shame and guilt, isn't it? Because guilt means that you've done something wrong, whereas shame is you are wrong. And
Yeah,
sometimes children can interpret that message as they are wrong,
yeah, yeah. And it's
which
hard,
is
isn't
how we then sometimes break off that aspect of us. And then you grow up, and then it can just cause all manner of things, can't it? Say you're trying to go for a job and you've got low self-esteem because that part that you broke off that you thought was wrong is now making you feel like an imposter, because another part of you is really confident and like, yeah, I'll go for that job. But then you've got that other part that says, no, you're not good enough.
Yeah. And I can sometimes feel like, oh my God, it's such a minefield, because I also want them to be resilient. Like, I want them to know that they can't always win at life, and that things will not go well. Like, I want them to know that that will happen, but that they'll be okay in it. So I try and
So
find,
building self-esteem is knowing that you'll be okay no matter what the outcome.
yeah, your value doesn't change because you pass a spelling test, or
Yeah.
because you get invited to the party or not. Like, that
So
doesn't.
you're an adult now, you're working with these adult clients now who've had this low self-esteem before, and maybe had, whether it be alcohol, drugs, or body image, or whatever else that's led them to have these issues and seek help. How do you then rebuild someone's self-esteem when they've had so many years of not having
Yeah.
self-esteem?
I think there's obviously set things that most of us need to work on. But first is like just getting a real idea of what is going on for them. So some of us are very different. Like, most of us, self-talk comes into it. Most of us, our environment comes into it. So for me, I try and, like, when I first with someone, we have a bit of like a present you, like the present you, the future you, and then like the bridge in the gap one. So we chat about all that, about how they actually want things to be, how they think things are now, what they like, what they don't like. And really kind of, it can take a while. It can take a while to do stuff, because there's so much stuff to work on, isn't there? But I get people to start with just noticing how they talk to themselves, noticing the language they use and why they think they're using that language. So really start to understand that relationship that really well, like that relationship between, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior, really understanding how that cycle works for them and what's triggering it. And then basically work on creating habits that support that person that we want to be, really working on our values and realigning with what on earth they are. Because I know for me, if someone said to me at one point, what's really important to you? I'd be like, I don't know, being thin. Like, nothing else is important. So I kind of, like, I had no hobbies apart from exercising. There's no hobbies that were healthy for me, and I had to really
You
come back.
ask the layers of why. So even if the top layer is I want to be thin, but why do you want to be thin?
Yeah,
It always seems to be to have love and acceptance.
absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's working on those things. And I think, like, if we can get to that acceptance point, so if we can neutralize the thoughts we have about ourselves, if we can start to create an environment, create self-talk, create habits that make us feel good, the more we do that, the more we shed that. Does that make sense? So I always say, like, sometimes, because some people, I've worked with some people, Nicola, and some of them really need to work on some really ingrained beliefs, and we've got to, like, really break away the evidence for that and sit there and kind of rip that apart a little bit. But do you know what? There's other people who have some beliefs, but do you know what? Once they've started putting the habits in, they've actually just convinced themselves through time that that belief's just BS.
Sometimes the beliefs have actually gone, but because it's the story that you tell yourself, that's the pattern, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think sometimes, a lot of it is our belief, isn't it? Our belief in the fact that we can change how we think, and that we can, I'm a strong believer, every single one of us, if we put our mind to doing something and we really, really want it, we can all do whatever the hell we want. We really can.
Yeah,
You know?
I
Uh,
believe that. I'm
Yeah,
quite
and I think
spiritual as well, and I actually think that wherever you are now to wherever you want to be, literally your manifested dream life, all that's in between is your limiting beliefs and all of the trauma. And the more things we heal, it clears the pathway, and then you're driven straight to whatever it is that you're trying to manifest. And I see it as I heal little parts of me, and then suddenly something comes in, and I'm like, how did I do that? But it was already mine. I just had stuff in the way.
yeah, well, you do, you work on your thinking, you work on your beliefs, and you show up very differently. And then because you show up differently, more things come in. I mean, how many times do you speak to people that say, well, this happened, oh God, and just as I expected, this negative thing happened. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's walk it back a little bit. And when you look at it, the self-talk was aligning towards the negative outcome, how they showed up physically, how they interacted with the other person, was just
Which is
everything was
interesting,
aligned.
though. I didn't think we were going to talk about manifestations, but literally, someone could be listening to this now and they're having a terrible time in life, and they are manifesting it because, like you just said, like your thoughts and the way that you speak, and then your behaviors, and you are literally causing your own life. But that's the thing that people don't want to hear, is that you are in control, you are the one that did this, you are accountable.
Yeah.
But then the positive to that is you are in control, you are accountable, you can change it.
Absolutely. And that is just the spin we choose to put on it, isn't it? I know I've sat there before and been like, I am so miserably unhappy. I am so unhappy. Like, I just hate life. Like, what is the point? And therefore I showed up by, taking pills, measuring things, trying to change myself, doing everything, drinking too much, doing everything that made me more miserable, and then sitting there and talking about how miserable my life was again. And then when I started to go, do you know what, my life is so miserable, I hate it, like, what is the point? I need to do something about it, because actually I know I'm better than that. And then I start slowly showing up differently. It made a massive difference. So I would say to people, just in the smallest way, just show up slightly differently tomorrow. Just show up slightly differently. Do something a little bit more aligned to how you want to feel. Whatever that is, whether it's going out the house a bit more or going for a walk or whatever it might be, like, just start to show up as that person. And the things that come up, if things keep coming up, yes, deal with them. If you have a belief that keeps popping its head, you're gonna have to challenge it. Maybe you're gonna have to sit with it. But I think a lot of the time when we start to do it, we start to see that it's possible. And the more that we see is possible, the more we believe that it can happen, and the more we show up differently. So the more we see it, and it just kind of feeds into itself. And don't,
So
not to rely on other people for it. Yeah, don't rely on other people for it. I spent a lot of time with expecting other people to make me
what do
happy.
you think comes first, self-esteem or confidence?
Oh, it's a very good question. Ah, I think. Oh, I don't know.
It's not a trick question.
I feel like I can answer this in either way, because obviously to get more confident in something, we have to do it. So, with more, the more competent we become at something, the more confident we feel doing it. So I would say self-esteem comes first, just because I think if we have really low self-esteem, we will not take the action that would increase the confidence.
Because a lot of people say, oh, I can't do that thing until I've got the confidence. And you've got to do the thing to get the confidence.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I had a chat, the last podcast that I did was with Simon Alexander Ong, who wrote the book Energized. And I was speaking to him about my own confidence, because I always felt like since I worked on it, I became a confident person. I call myself a body confidence coach. Confidence is a big thing in everything that I do. And I thought, so I've got confidence. And then certain things that I was saying, he picked it apart and said, that's bravery. And I thought, oh my God, like, you've just taken away all my confidence. But he was right. And actually, ever since I was a child, I was always very brave. So I would do the things that other people wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And it was my bravery that's allowed me to, without having ever publicly spoken before, push myself to go and public speak. And then obviously from doing that, I then got better at it and did more and more.
Yeah. And as you say, that comes down to that piece of, am I ready for it? No. Am I convinced this is going to go well? No. Like, am I absolutely papping in my pants? 100%. But I know I'll be okay. Like, it doesn't matter. If this goes horrifically wrong, what's the worst that's going to have happened? Like, what is it? And I always say to people, like, we can make a really big long list, can't we, of negative what ifs. I'm always like, just try and flip them. Just start by just flipping them. If you're sat there and you're creating this massive negative story about something that's not even happened yet, or about what people are going to think about you, because we do it, don't we? We'll be like, oh my God, I'm going to go to the party. Everyone's going to think I look fat. No one's going to talk to me. It's going to be horrific. I'm going to make a right fool of myself. Like we go to town with this, we could write so many fiction books, couldn't we, as people? And I think, when we sit there and think, yeah, but what if, we turn them what if to like, yeah, but what if I go and have a really good time? What if I catch with a friend?
Exactly that with my last talk, actually.
Yeah.
I was a bit nervous because I've done loads of talks in schools for younger people, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to adults again, and because I haven't done that for a while, I'm going to be nervous again. And what if it goes wrong? What if they think this? What if that happens? And then I did exactly that. Well, what if it goes great? It's gone great before, it could go great again. What if I don't miss any words out and I say everything really articulately?
Absolutely. But
that's the thing about self-esteem though, isn't it? Like, I have self-esteem, I have self-worth, I know I'm worthy of having the outcome, so now I'm going to be brave and push myself to do that thing that will give me the confidence and the outcome that I want.
Absolutely. And I'll always say to people, like, just like, if we're saying like, I'm really nervous, I'm this, I'm that, I'm like, just change it to I feel instead, because it takes the power away from it. If we're saying I'm going to be really awful at the presentation, if we turn around and say I feel really nervous and like this is going to go wrong, then it's different, isn't it? Like, I am, like, it's like a massive identity statement. This is who I am. I'm an anxious person, I'm this person, I'm an ugly person, I'm an unconfident person. But if we say right now I feel unconfident because, and we can understand it, we can do something about it. Right now I feel really ugly because it's just
what's interesting though, and I mentioned this in my last talk actually, about the orange jumper. I don't know where I first heard this, but it's stuck, the orange jumper. It's because if you feel that you're wearing an orange jumper and somebody goes, I hate that orange jumper, then it attacks you because it's true. Where if somebody's pointing at you saying, I hate that blue jumper, but you're wearing an orange jumper, it doesn't stick. So it literally is a case of working on your self-esteem and building your own worth and value and loving yourself, that other people's opinions don't matter. So even if you are there and you're nervous and you think, you feel like, what if it goes wrong? It doesn't really matter what other people say or how they're going to judge you, because from the inside, it's a learning experience. I did the best I could. I'm okay with the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? I think I heard a similar one, but interestingly enough, because I'm talking to you, Nicola, it was about blue hair. So I think it was Rob Dial who was talking about, if you're walking down the street and someone said, I hate your blue hair, and you had brown hair, you'd be like, but if you had blue hair, you'd be offended. Sorry, I laughed then when you said that. But yeah,
you noticed the blue hair. There is no bad marketing.
No, absolutely not. So, because what is the quote? There's a quote that goes something like, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And
I think I like that.
Yeah, and there's this thing, like, if you don't believe it, you won't believe someone else saying it. And I think it goes double-edged, doesn't it? Because like, if I think I'm intelligent, you could tell me I'm stupid all day long, it won't matter. But when I start telling myself I'm stupid, and this is where, like, as kids, it's important, isn't it? Because when we're growing up, we don't think we're stupid and we don't think we're ugly until loads of people tell us we are. And then enough people tell us, that's not, at that point, it's not necessarily the problem. But then when we look in the mirror and we say to ourselves, I am stupid, I am ugly, here lies in the self-talk, and here now we think we are. And I think it's really just unattaching ourselves from that.
Yeah. And we need to reparent ourselves, because sometimes some of those things came from our parents.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the beginning of our beliefs.
100%. 100%. And say whether that's in their words or their actions, we get it from things that are said to us. We get it from just watching people's behavior and interpreting what that behavior means. And sometimes it's not done by our parents purposefully to cause a problem or to make us feel bad. They just don't know they're doing it. Like, it's all, I always say to people, when you're trying,
it may have even been a joke. My stepdad used to say I was ugly as a joke, because he used to do lots of farts, and I used to say, you smell, and his response was, well, you're ugly. And I know it was a joke. Like, as an adult, I can logically see that, but the logic and the emotions are two different things. And so as a child, I thought, oh, well, I'm the ugly one.
Yeah. And say, I don't think people are more aware now about how much we attach ourselves to words. But yeah, back in the day, you could say all sorts of things, and no one thought anything of it.
And that when it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? I then thought I'm ugly, so then my environment gave that back to me and confirmed it. And I thought, oh well, I didn't get that opportunity because I'm ugly.
Yeah, that's it. Because we can believe, our brains are amazing. We can believe whatever we want to believe, and it's just choosing what do I want to believe, and then find all the stuff that backs that up instead, isn't it?
Which is a great place to finish on. I feel like we could probably do another podcast like part 2. I have to organise that so we can go into a few more of the questions that I had. But everything you said was amazing. It was great to hear your journey. And I know that you're doing some great work in the world with people and their self-esteem. I've seen your groups and your lives. So if you could share with us where people can hear more about your work.
Yes. So my favorite place to hang out is Facebook. I tried to make it Instagram once, but it's not. So it is Facebook. So basically my group is the Self-Esteem Society. But basically, if you just look for me, Natalie Trusdale on Facebook, there is not many of us, and just be my friend. But yeah, and if you want to, the website is just www.natalietrusdale.com, and that's got the links to it all anyway. But yeah, just come and chat to me, like a chat.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for having me
Until
on.
next time. I just